Number 68, Author Unknown, from All the Year Round, Volume 10. This is recorded to celebrate the 8th anniversary of LibriVox. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The 9:30 p.m. train had left me on the platform of the Carlisle station. I was on my way to Glasgow and had resolved to break the journey by sleeping at the Railway Hotel, because it had a convenient entrance from the platform. As I was seeing my luggage put on a truck, a middle-aged, portly man of gentlemanlike manner and with a fine, full voice came up to where I stood and commenced an elaborate search among the pile of baggage for a trunk he had lost. A black trunk with white diamonds on it. He expressed himself vexed and distressed at having lost it, and seemed quite unable to determine what course to pursue. I sympathised with him, and went with him to the telegraph office, where he telegraphed to Dover for the lost luggage.
"What hotel do you go to?"
said the stranger in a deep, rich, comfortable voice. I replied, "To the Railway Hotel, as I leave by the 6:15 train in the morning for Glasgow."
"That is my train, and my destination," said the stranger, "so I will go to the same hotel."
He was a stout man, standing above 5'7", neatly dressed in a dark frock-coat, lemon-coloured marsala waistcoat, and black neckcloth. He wore the sharp standing collars of the last fashion but one, and carried an umbrella, a telescope, and an air-cushion in one hand, while the fingers of the other hand played with a heavy steel watch-chain. He was a man with large, well-defined features, bushy eyebrows, and a rather coarse but humorous mouth. When he lifted his hat, I saw that he was rather bald, and had a scar high up on his left temple. "Beds?" said the lady at the hotel bar, running her finger up and down a large black multiplication table covered with white figures, with mysterious keys hanging below each of them like fruit on the stem. While she was pursuing this task with the air of conferring a favour rather than of welcoming guests, the stranger, who had already introduced himself to me as Mr. Thistlewood, whispered in my ear,
"Do the Custom House officers take bribes?"
I saw, of course, that he meant this as a joke, and I laughed. "Of course not," I said. "They'll pass our luggage directly." Mr. Thistlewood was evidently a born humorist, for not the slightest returned smile dimpled his face as he replied,
"Well, so I thought. They'll search it more completely, I suppose, when we get to Tibet."
Excellent satirist! He meant to ridicule our absurd Custom House restrictions, and to glance incidentally at the speed of modern travelling, as if Carlisle were only the first station on some great and perilous journey we were about to undertake. 67 and 68, John," said the lady, handing the keys to the porter, who instantly shouldered my trunk and began to ascend the staircase.
"Would you order dinner, sir?"
he said, as he let the portmanteau drop at the door of 67. "Dinner for two," I answer, glancing at my new friend, "and as soon as possible."
"What'll you have, sir?"
"Soup, a whiting or so, and a roast fowl."
"Exactly," said my friend. "Sorry, sir," said the porter to Mr. Thistlewood, "that there's no glass in your room, sir. Chambermaid broke it yesterday. Get you one directly, sir." "No, no, no, no," said my companion, rather irritably. "I never allow glass in my room. Bring a glass, and I leave the house."
As he said this, he smiled at me, as much as to say this is a joke of mine to startle the porter.
"Oh, of course not, if you don't wish, sir,"
said the porter, shutting me in 67 and leading Mr. Thistlewood into number 68. To wash, dress, and put on slippers after a long journey is a great pleasure. My room, 67, had a side door opening into 68, and as my washing stand stood near it, I could not help hearing my eccentric friend talking to himself as he took off his boots. All that I could distinguish, however, were these remarkable words:
"The discrimination of logic by Jack Sheppard, as the homology of thought from psychology, as the phenomenology of mind, as Dr. Johnson very truly said to Tippoo Sahib, will not hold. Shalabala!"
This shalabala was shouted so loud that I thought it right to answer the humorist or actor or ventriloquist or professor or whatever he might be. I tapped at the door.
"How about Tibet now?"
replied a voice, and then there came a curious chuckling laugh, and the question,
"Do you understand conic fluxions?"
"Not a bit," I answered, "and what's more, I never even heard of them."
"No more did Hegel,"
he replied,
"till the Bampton professor came and proved by arithmetic that Moses was wrong about the height of the pyramids."
What inexhaustible fancy! There was a tap at my door. "Dinner's ready, sir." "All right," I replied. "We'll be down directly." I was down first, and Thistlewood was not long after me. The soup came in, and my companion superintended the tureen.
"Soup?"
said he. I nodded in the affirmative.
"Do you profess ontology or dentology?" said he. "For as I took off my boots just now, it seemed to me that you were one of those persons who would smile at the baseless dialectic of Plato and deride the irrational logic of Hegel. Waiter, you've forgotten the bread. Stale." "Pardon me, sir, but I am an enthusiast, as you have perhaps already guessed."
"A great humorist," I said, laughing, "and a man of science, I am sure."
"You're right, sir, you're right,"
said my friend rather vociferously.
"Cayenne pepper, waiter." I have devoted years in my professor's rooms in St. Bees to studying the solar spots and the causes of the sun's heat. I have also only yesterday discovered a clue. To what, do you think, sir? Tell the cook, waiter, there is too much salt in this soup."
"I really cannot guess. No, thank you. No more soup."
"Perpetual motion, that's all,"
said my eccentric friend coolly, as he removed the cover of the fish.
"I'll explain it to you in a moment with pieces of bread. This crust is D. That is a rod fixed by one end to a beam supporter, while these bits of crumb, A, B, and C, this big one, C, are 3 pairs of levers forming a parallelopidon. This spoon is D, the piston rod attached to H, the salt cellar. This knife E is the hot water pump connected with the parallel motion at F. This fork—"
I suppose I looked rather wandering, for my new friend here took mercy on me.
"I see," he said. "You don't follow my definitions. I will explain it better after dinner, with French plums on a clear table. Leg or wing?"
My friend was a master mind, that was quite evident. How could I expect to follow the flights of such a mind?
"Potato?"
"Thank you."
"It was I," he said, "who invented the Papin's digester, Arnott's stove, and the argand lamp, but they've robbed me of them all. It was I who discovered the plan of watertight bulkheads, the paddle box lifeboat, Ely's cartridges, and the percussion cap. But they robbed me, sir, of everything. Glory, 3%, Real del Monte, Mexicans, everything. They'd burn me if they could, because I anticipated them with the sewing machine, the oyster opener, the screw boot jack, and the apple pip crusher."
"You're not the first inventor," I said, laughing at the eccentric variety of my friend's studies, "who has been robbed of his due fame. Look at Galileo."
"I knew him,"
said Thistlewood.
"He lived in St. Mary Axe and sold stationery. He was of a green complexion. Some more fowl, sir?"
The naivete of this remark made me laugh in spite of myself. "If you please, a drumstick will do. I presume from that remark you entertain some eccentric notions about transmigration?"
"Of course I do. I call all men who die divers. They return, but I know them again. Different names and professions, but, Lord bless you, the same faces and manners. Oh, I've got my eye on the divers. There's a butcher lives opposite me. Fat, square face, little eyes like a prize pig. Stands straddling at his door with his hands on his waist. People call that man Jackson of number 33 Whitechapel Road. Who do you think he really is?"
"Can't guess."
"Henry the Eighth. Simply Henry the Eighth. Nero is a prize fighter. Francis I is on the Stock Exchange. Socrates keeps a cheese shop on Ludgate Hill. Tamerlane writes for a Sunday paper. Marlborough is now an omnibus conductor. Oh, I've got my eye on them."
I nearly fell off my chair laughing.
"Robespierre cuts hair. Louis XI is a dissenting minister, and Bossuet edits Hood's works. Oh, I know them. I know their faces. They can't deceive me."
Here the conversation dropped, for the waiter brought in some sherry we had ordered. When we had helped ourselves, had nodded, and sipped our wine, this extraordinary man asked,
"Were you ever up in a balloon?"
"I never had that pleasure."
"A pleasure indeed,"
said the enthusiast.
"But I once had a most remarkable escape. Some villain, jealous of my fame, substituted fulminating mercury for the sand usually used for ballast. Luckily, I was taken ill the night before. The man who went up in my place, by a special providence, when half a mile high, just over Lambeth, was blown to a cinder. His watch fell in a garden near Norwood and was given me as a keepsake. Here it is. You observe the dent on the right-hand side? That's where it struck a milkman who was walking up to the back door at the time."
"I don't see the dent," said I, looking closely. "But here is the name of the maker. That's Dent." Mr. Thistlewood exploded with laughter.
"Oh, you sharp fellow!" he said. "You see in a moment when I'm drawing the long bow. Pass the wine."
That insatiable tongue began to tire. The day's excitement and the fatigues of the journey began to tell. We both grew silent and sipped contemplatively. First I yawned, then my friend yawned and looked at the candles on the sideboard. Then we lighted up again about the American War, about the wrongs of Poland, about Mexico, about the cruel amusements now in vogue, about sensational books and other matters. Finally we went upstairs together and shook hands at my bedroom door. I had blown out the light and was just tumbling into bed when my conscience smote me. I had forgotten to wind up my watch. I instantly opened my bedroom door and relighted my candle at the little blue jet of gas burning in the corridor. Then going back into my room and shutting the door, I took down my coat and searched my pockets for my keys. I dived and brought up Bradshaw, a pocket handkerchief, and a rumpled ball of paper, which, being smoothed out, revealed itself as an ill-treated copy of the Times. As it lay before me on the drawers, just as I was bending down to blow out the candle, my eye fell on an advertisement at the top of the second column. Seeing the words "Caution to Hotel Keepers," it remained riveted there until I had devoured every syllable. The terrible advertisement that seemed suddenly to turn my heart into a large lump of ice ran thus: "Caution to hotel keepers. An insane gentleman of middling stature, stout, rather bald, black hair and bushy eyebrows, dressed in black frock coat and marsala waistcoat, carrying a few papers, an air cushion, and an umbrella, is going about seeking accommodation with anybody who will trust him. He has no means and is dangerous. Information leading to his discovery, given to Mr. Oxford, newsagent, Clerkenwell, shall be rewarded." Good heavens! thought I, as the paper dropped from my hands. A dangerous maniac in the room next to me! Shall I alarm the house? No. That, on second consideration, I thought unadvisable, for should I be mistaken in my companion's identity, I should lay myself open to an action for defamation, false imprisonment, or some other horrible thing of that kind. Besides, madmen were only dangerous, I said to myself, under provocation and on their special topics. He might fancy himself Emperor of China, or a land turtle, a washing basin, or a cucumber, but there was no great harm in that. No, I would shake off these fears, perhaps, after all, utterly groundless, lock the doors, and sleep soundly until Boots called me for the early train. Once away in the train, I could easily cross-examine my companion in such a way as to elicit his insanity, if it really existed, and could then act accordingly. I determined, however, before going to bed, to reconnoitre, so I quietly stole barefoot to the door of communication between the two bedrooms, in order to listen. I put my ear to a chink, and could hear a drowsy voice, as of a man almost asleep, droning nonsense verses and weights and measures. Thus,
If A is to be what D is to C, according to Bohn's deductions, then F is to me what O is to P. That's my theory of conic fluxions.
Then the voice stopped, like clockwork run out. A moment after, it continued, more drowsily:
10 gold ichibos equal 10 gold copangs. 15 mas equal 1 ichibo. 1 oban equal 3 copangs. 1 kodama equal 15 kondarins. 1 managoga equal 10,000 ikmagoga. 1 tatami equal.
Here the voice stopped, and a tremendous sonorous snore followed. The man was mad, that was evident, but he was harmless, and he was asleep. I felt in the darkness, for I had blown out the candle, for the key. There was none, so I contented myself with quietly placing 2 chairs in such a way as that no one could open the door without moving them and awaking me. I then took out the key of my own bedroom door, placed it under my pillow, and jumped into bed. For some 20 minutes I sat up listening to the heavy snoring of Mr. Thistlewood. I then lay down, fell asleep, and dreamed. Presently a low creaking noise awoke me, and I started up in bed. Yes, it was the maniac. There were the chairs moving slowly back, and there was the door opening wider and wider. Well, he might be restless and curious, and yet mean no harm. He might be sleep-walking, and yet be amiable and tractable. My bed was far from the door, so I turned my head towards the door, rolled it in the bedclothes, leaving only one eye clear, and lay as still as a mummy. The door opened, and Thistlewood entered on tiptoe. He was in his long nightgown, but there was nothing else spectral about him. He had his boots on, his face was red, and his smile was as pleasant as ever. It was just daybreak, and the cold, pure grey light showed him clearly to me as he pulled up the blinds and looked around with great curiosity but perfect composure. He was talking to himself.
Kepler, he said, you invented the pendulum. Bacon, you discovered turtle soup. Rumford, you invented the patent shaving box. But you are all fools compared to me, for I discovered the egg whipping machine, the oyster opener, the knife cleaner, and Betsy's brandy.
All of a sudden, the reflection of himself in my pier-glass caught his eye, and the sight of it seemed to drive him to fury. He lifted his right foot and drove it through the glass, which shivered it into 1,000 pieces. Then, in a moment, he broke the legs off 2 chairs and shattered the second glass, the washing jug, and the glass over the fireplace.
I know you, he cried. I know you. You have been following me about for years. You dog me everywhere. I see you in the sunshine, in the moonlight, on the walls, on the ceiling, in the silver spoons, in the aquarium, in the shop windows, everywhere and everywhere. I will thus beat and smash you, hell-born image of myself.
As he said this, he pounded the fragments almost to dust, danced on them, and laughed as they splashed round him. Then, seizing a huge hatchet-shaped fragment of plate glass, he cried, looking towards my bed,
"But where is that wretch who denied last night that I invented perpetual motion? It was he who filled this room with images to vex and dog me. Stop! I'll go and get my razor. It will do it cleaner."
The moment he darted into his own room, I leapt out of bed, rushed into the corridor, and quietly locked my door on the outside. Then I tried the key in his, and finding it fitted, I locked his door too. I heard him scream and howl, drag down the bed curtains, and rush at the door, and kick and thump, and cut at the wood with his razor, as he cried, "40 days I have been in the wilderness. Newton, let me out and bring me a boiled pelican. Kepler, some brandy and water. And tell the landlord, Flamstead, there's a man run away here without paying for his bed. Cut his throat, I tell you, for he says I didn't discover perpetual motion." I ran to the end of the corridor, where some 20 bells hung. I beat on them all till every person in the hotel came to my help, landlord, waiters, chambermaids, ostlers, guests, everybody. I told them of my narrow escape, and of the madman, and we then arranged to secure him by flinging blankets over him when we opened the door and rushed in. We did secure the man, after a tremendous struggle, for his strength was superhuman. We then tied his hands behind him and sent for the police to put a strait waistcoat on him and take him into custody. Next day his keepers arrived and took charge of him. It appeared that he was a professor of St. Bees, a scientific inventor who had gone mad partly from overstudy, but still more from being rejected by a lady. Ever since that rejection, he had taken it into his head that he was so superhumanly hideous that no one, male or female, could bear to look at him, and he had, in consequence, taken a marked hatred to all mirrors and looking-glasses, which he made a rule of destroying wherever he found them. End of number 68, author unknown. Recorded by Ruth Golding.